Donc, OK, voilà. Bon, Louise, tu peux t'occuper des admissions.
Oui, vas-y, toi.
Et moi, je
Occupe-toi. Oui, sans problème.
regarde.
Donc, bonsoir. Voilà aujourd'hui notre quatrième réunion du genre et c'est pour la traduction du quatrième entretien avec Jetsunna Tenzin Palmo. Comme on a bien indiqué autrefois, cet ensemble d'interviews semble intéresser plusieurs éditeurs et comme il nous a bien informé le docteur Jacques Vigne, ça va être, une fois que c'est fini, bien sûr, au moins on en a une dizaine d'interviews éditées en français. On est aussi en train de traduire en arabe. On a fait des traductions électroniques en anglais, en français, en espagnol et en allemand. Ils sont tous jusqu'au troisième entretien disponibles sur le site Biblion, le mien, et celui du docteur Jacques Vigne. Et bientôt aussi, on aura le quatrième entretien disponible en texte et par la suite aussi disponible en vidéo. Je donne la parole tout de suite au docteur Jacques Vigne pour commencer soit par l'interview et soit par en même temps sa traduction simultanée.
Oui, donc, je suis en train de voir, donc, j'ai le début de l'interview et comment mettre sur le même écran le... Donc, voilà, je pense qu'il va falloir que je... Oui. Voilà, je pense que là, ça va être bon. Alors... Voilà, donc je pense qu'on peut y aller.
Anyway, as a result, I grew up with this very deep awareness.
Good evening for all of you and welcome Jetsunna Tenzin Palmo for our fourth interview. More and more people are interested in these interviews and for this moment we translated the text. First we have the text in English and in French, in Arabic, and also in two also new languages in Spanish and in German. And they are available, the texts are all available in our site. Have the name of the site, I put the name of the site here, it is Dar Biblion, and also it is available on YouTube. I put also the name of the channel of YouTube, it is on my name. And this fourth interview will also be available as a text and also as a video in next day. So everything will be available, and also many people are interested in publishers to publish these interviews in French. Also, maybe we can. We are managing to publish them in Arabic. So we will have with these interviews a good book on this knowledge of Jetsunna Tenzin Palmo. We'll start directly because you like to go to bed in early time. I remember that Sumna, when I was in France, it was in 1996. And His Holiness the Dalai Lama came for a visit to Paris.
Oui, là, donc, je n'ai pas écrit la traduction dans de ce que disait Louis, mais il raconte l'histoire. Donc, il explique qu'on est en train de traduire en différentes langues ces interviews et il explique l'histoire du Dalai Lama qui était dans un grand interview télévisé en France, mais il a dit qu'il se couchait à 8 heures et donc ils ont avancé cette interview qui était avec une grande audience. Ils l'ont avancé pour que le Dalai Lama puisse aller se coucher à 8 heures.
So, I come to welcome Dalai Lama because he sleeps after out death and are very afraid of it. But when we are not afraid of death in life, we are relieved on an immense birth. When and how not.
On n'entend pas bien, Jacques.
Pardon?
On n'entend pas bien. La voix est très...
Death is totally natural.
Ça va venir, je pense.
Everybody dies.
Ouais, si tu peux hausser la voix, ça sera bien. Jacques, on n'entend rien, Jacques. Jacques, on n'entend rien.
Jacques, on ne t'entend pas.
Voilà, là, ça devrait aller. Vous m'entendez?
Oui, maintenant,
D'accord. Bon, ben, on reprend. Je pense que vous entendrez aussi le.
Our consciousness and our karmic propensities from
Vous entendez là?
Oui,
D'accord, c'est bon. Allez, on repart.
this lifetime. So we should be careful with that because that's the one thing we can't get rid of. So take care of our minds, take care of our heart, so that we don't do anything which harms others, and that we try to cultivate the mind and transform it into the kind of mind which we are happy to take with us into the future. Then we don't have to worry, you know. We did the best in this lifetime to benefit ourselves, benefit others, and, you know, okay, then let's see what happens next.
The same mind, we take it with us after birth.
Hmm?
You said this mind, we take it, this same mind, we take
The
it.
consciousness, our ordinary conceptual mind, maybe not, but the stream of consciousness goes on. I mean, the stream of consciousness never stops. That goes on.
Yeah, in fact, you say, Jetsunna, no one can maintain me that consciousness does not exist after death, because I have seen over and over again proof to the contrary. It is not a belief, it is certain. I have also learned that there are other forms of existence which are perfectly real, but in ordinary times, we do not have consciousness. So my question, how are you certain of this existence after death? And what are the other forms?
Well, you know, I was actually brought up as a spiritualist. My mother was a spiritualist, and we had seances every week at our house when the neighbors would come. And at that time, during that period, I was probably about 8 or 9 years old. And during that time, we would talk with those who had gone on the spirit guides. And what they told us, the information that they told us, one woman would channel them, were things which we could not possibly know, but which were then ratified by our investigations. For example, one couple that would come to these meetings, this was just after the war, right? This was in the 50s. And they had lost their only son in the war. His tank had blown up on the bridge. And so he would come to them. And I mean, there are many things which he said, which they didn't know, but later they checked up and found it was true. But right now, for example, he said, well, then I died on the 23rd of September, say. And they said to him, no, dear, it was the 24th of September. And he said, no, it was my death. I remember it was the 23rd. And you check up with the War Office because they made a mistake. So they wrote to the War Office and they said, we understand you told us it was the 23rd, but actually it's the 24th. And they got a letter back from the War Office saying, yes, so sorry, it was a clerical error. It was indeed the 24th. So nobody could know that. You can't make it up, right? I mean, that was how it was. And also he himself would come through and call himself Tom. And they said to him, but darling, your name is Cyril. Why are you calling yourself Tom? And he said, well, to tell you the truth, I never like to tell you, but I hate the name Cyril. I've always hated the name Cyril. And so I used my middle name when I joined the army and called myself Tom. His middle name was Thomas. And then they met friends of his from the army who had known him in those days, and they all called him Tom. They didn't even know his first name was Cyril. So like this, I mean, his family couldn't possibly know that. They discovered it themselves. So, and many, many things happened. Anyway, as a result, I grew up with this very deep awareness that we are surrounded the whole time by many, many different realms of being. I mean, the one that we see, which is so, you know, obvious to us, it's just the outer shell of many, many, many much more subtle realms, which are surrounding us the whole time. And sometimes helping us, sometimes making problems, normally just ignoring us. You know, we're leaving us to get on with our own problems. So as a result of that, I had grew up, I mean, death and what happens after death was an everyday topic of conversation in our house. So it was never something that I feared or was something you never mentioned, because we were always very, very fascinated by, after we leave this particular realm of being, what happens next? And it seems what happens next for most people, if they're not really bad, is okay. Nothing to fear.
Okay, you can continue.
Yes, it's okay. I mean, all I'm trying to say is that all the feedback, also when I myself had nearly burned to death and had a near-death experience and left the body, and I was looking down at my body. I mean, I was at that time surrounded by beings of light and tremendous warmth and love, and saying, come with us, come with us. And I mean, at that time, I certainly was, I thought, oh, now I'm going to die. Well, that's interesting. And I really wanted to go with these lovely beings of light. I didn't want to go back into my burned out little body. So, I mean, I don't know, but personally for myself, I feel that really, unless one is really a very, very wicked person, one doesn't have much to fear.
But in other hand, you deny the existence of Atman by saying, when I had heard for the first time this term of Atman, I had no fear. Buddhism, on the other hand,
I heard it for a while.
The
word Atman.
Of Atman. He did not develop any notion of entity independent of the self. So isn't a paradox, my question, isn't a paradox that consciousness continues to exist after death while Atman, spirit or soul, doesn't?
So the point is that our consciousness is not something static and unchanging. This is what the Buddha was denying. Something at the center of us, which is individual, unchanging, eternal. That, he said, look for it, you'll never find it. But he did not deny that we exist. And he did not deny that we are conscious beings. And so what we are trying to do, I mean, also, you know, in the consciousness, our ordinary conceptual consciousness changes moment to moment. It's like a river, right? It's just flowing. And so what he's saying is that the nature of the mind, the very nature of our mind is pure consciousness. It is indeed pure awareness or clarity. It is luminous. It is knowing. It is love and compassion, and it is great wisdom. That is our true nature. In the Mahayana, it's called that we possess. That is not, is we have Buddha as our own little Buddha. It's not like that. It's therefore described more like being like space or like the sky. It connects us with all beings. It's not what separates us from all beings. And that pure consciousness is our true nature. And through meditation, that's what we are trying to recognize, because we have it always, of course, but we don't recognize it. Personally, I think that all the spiritual aspects of religions, like the Sufis and the Christian mystics and Jewish mystics, and of course the Hindu Mahatmas, they have all understood that we are something so much greater than who we normally identify ourselves as being. But what blocks our vision is this clinging to a small self. That this small self is what we think is me, even though we might call it Atman, but it's not really Atman. It's me, a bigger, more glorious me. And that, the Buddha said, is your big mistake. It's not like that at all. I mean, when we even get a glimpse of it, there's no self, there's no other. It's non-dual by its very nature.
Yeah, in fact, what we carry with us after death, the pure consciousness only, or our...
Both. Because we're carrying, as long as we cling to an ego, as long as there is an ego there will be karma. Right? The ego carries karma along with it. We are only free from karma when we are free from the ego, when we are liberated. In the meantime, as long as we are grasping at our sense of conceptual selfhood, then we will just continue to rotate in the round of birth and death, and rebirth and re-death and rebirth and re-death endlessly. But at the same time, the whole time, this quality of pure primordial awareness is always there. It's always there. Otherwise, we wouldn't be conscious. Our problem is we don't recognize it. It's like the sky, all we see are clouds. We don't see the clear blue sky. So this is our problem. We need to look at the unconditioned beyond the conditioned. And all great mystics have understood this. I mean, that it's not just, Buddhists talk about this. Everybody does. They use their own language and their own examples. But basically, they're all saying, we mistake our true nature. Our true nature is divine, and we don't recognize that. And that's our tragedy.
But why we are not aware of our previous life and how to be aware of it?
Oh, some people are very aware of it, especially when they're children. Many children are talk about what happened before, but nobody listens to them. And they think, oh, you stop talking like that. That's just, you're making this up. You're telling lies. And people don't recognize, that what the children are saying is what they actually remember. I mean, there are hundreds, thousands of cases of this, of children when they're young, describing the place, describing the people, describing everything. And if they are taken back to that place, then they recognize it and also recognize any changes which have taken place. So there's plenty of evidence. But as we grow somewhat older, then all the conditioning of this lifetime takes over, and the rest kind of goes to the background because nobody listens to you anyway. So what's the point of talking about it? So many children, they just, then this lifetime fills their consciousness and they forget.
They know a previous life just by innocence, or they have some vision of it?
They know about it, or sometimes they dream about it. I mean, have recurring dreams. I also had recurring dreams of a past life about ancient Greece, which I absolutely had no idea about as a small child living in London. But I could feel it. I could feel the sun. I could see, everything about it was so clear. And I had it again and again and again. Very, very joyful. And very clear where I was walking up a hill to a Greek temple. And many children have that sort of thing. They know, they can recognize people even. And of course, we're in the Tibetan Tulku system, where masters, when they die, are then recognized again when they're very young and taken back to the same place, then that's very, very common that they recognize everything and even their own possessions from last life, etc. I mean, this is this is part of the Tibetan system for making sure that they have the continuity of masters and that they don't lose them.
Jetsuna, we talk this moment about meditation, and we have many questions on it. You are professional and you are a great teacher on meditation. You say about your meditation experiences, especially during your hermitage period. You say, frankly, I don't like to talk about that. It is like your sexual experiences. Some people like to talk about them, others don't personally. I think it is extremely intimate. Page 166. My first question, what is your advice to meditators? To talk about their experiences as they may be useful to others or to keep them quiet?
Well, usually we are told that we should only talk about our experience to our personal teachers because they are the ones who are going to give us guidance. And but sometimes we could discuss it or compare experiences with our close Dharma friends, especially if we are studying with the same teacher. You know, I mean, that is also sometimes permissible. But, you know, some people like to discuss these things and some people don't. On the whole, it's considered that if we talk too much about our experiences, that it will corrupt them.
You mean the ego will be more...
Yeah, and also it dilutes it, you know, because it's something very... For example, when I was in retreat, I would have very, very, very vivid dreams, very prophetic dreams. Mm-hmm. And then one time I was in one town, and this sadhu, who I didn't know at all, came up to me in the marketplace. And he said, I have to tell you one thing. It is very important you never tell anyone your dreams. Never tell anyone your dreams. And then he walked away. Mm-hmm. So I think it was because sometimes if we talk about these things, which are very intimate, that it dilutes them and eventually dissipates them. This is why normally you only speak about these very...
Voilà, donc je vais passer à la vidéo suivante.
In fact, you say
non, c'est bon.
They are like sexual experiences. Is there any similarity between sexual experiences and meditation experiences to compare the late?
But most people think this is something very private and very intimate, and it's none of your business. It only concerns me and, you know, whoever. And they don't want to talk about that sort of thing. I mean, it's not something you would talk about. You know, it's something which is between the two of you, and that's enough. And likewise with meditation, it's between you and your teacher.
Jetsuna, but the masters, your own master or the masters you met before, then great lamas, they talk about their experiences or they keep it quiet?
Well, my own lama never talked about anything. Some might do. They might tell some story about some experience they had if they think it would be helpful, but certainly they would never boast about it. And the Tibetan lamas on the whole, I think they don't talk about that sort of thing very much. They talk about somebody else, but they wouldn't talk about themselves.
So sometimes if they talk about their own experience, maybe it is good for the students or to
Jacques, on ne voit pas la traduction.
D'accord.
Well, I think it would depend.
Personne ne voit la traduction apparemment.
Ben écoutez, ah oui,
Oui, c'est ça, on ne voit pas, Jacques.
Oui,
On
il y a
est
eu
plusieurs.
je ne sais pas pourquoi il est passé en pause. Donc, on va remettre. Pas de problème.
Merci. Merci.
Depuis le début, hein. C'est
Depuis le début,
Vous
on n'a
ne
pas.
voyez pas la traduction?
Oui, oui,
Fallait
depuis
me
le
dire.
début.
Fallait me le dire.
Bah, moi, j'ai
Alors,
cru que uniquement c'est moi qui ne vois pas, alors que là, quand j'ai lu le chat, bah, ça m'est avéré que
alors,
personne n'a.
donc, vous voyez l'interview, mais pas la traduction.
L'interview, moi, je vois une photo, pas l'interview en vidéo.
Moi, je vois rien, Jacques. J'ai l'impression qu'il n'y a rien. Il y a juste marqué Jacques Vigne a commencé le partage d'écran.
Ah oui, effectivement, donc c'est partage d'écran est en pause.
Et chacun croyait que c'est lui uniquement qui ne voit rien.
Oui, oui.
Et
Alors,
finalement, on s'est rendu compte que tout le monde ne voit rien.
oui. Voilà. Ça. Alors, partage d'écran. Donc, voilà. Ah oui. Donc, il faut que je rouvre la fenêtre. Bon, ben, ça va venir. Voilà. Donc là, vous voyez le.
Oui, là, on voit le texte.
Oui.
Voilà. D'accord. Donc, il y a un texte qui n'est pas. Voilà. Donc, c'est bon là, je pense. Et vous voyez la vidéo aussi?
Pas encore.
Non.
You know, that if they felt it was helpful.
Là, vous entendez la vidéo ou pas?
On entend.
D'accord. Bon, ben, je crois que c'est pas mal. Et,
On entend, on ne voit pas.
et vous voyez le texte?
On voit le texte, oui.
D'accord, alors. Parce que oui, c'est pas très facile parce que je crois que c'est soit le texte, soit la vidéo. C'est considéré comme
Autrefois, on
deux.
a vu les deux en même temps, simultanément.
Ben oui. Euh, et là,
On n'a que la vidéo.
Là,
que
que
la
la
vidéo,
vidéo.
oui. Et oui, c'est parce que ils considèrent que c'est deux fenêtres différentes
Oui.
et ils n'acceptent pas de partager en même temps. Mais les fois précédentes, vous aviez vu les deux en même temps?
Ouais.
D'accord. Donc, comment faire? Je vais essayer de fermer les autres fenêtres. Je vous demande 2 minutes. De fermer toutes les autres fenêtres, peut-être ça va améliorer.
Ouais.
Pas sûr, mais au moins on va essayer ça.
C'est ce qu'on a fait autrefois. On a fermé les autres.
Oui, alors,
On a fermé tout. Il n'y avait que la vidéo et la traduction.
oui. Alors, oui, je vais arrêter le partage d'écran pour pouvoir. Oui, alors. Voilà, alors. Bon, là, on y voit déjà plus clair. Oh là là. Alors, je réessaie. Film et TV. Oui, c'est toujours le même problème. Il choisit soit un écran, soit l'autre. Ah oui, peut-être. Ah oui, c'est ça, j'ai trouvé. Là, ça doit être bon.
Ouais,
Vous voyez
Oui.
les deux, là?
Oui,
oui.
D'accord.
c'est bon.
Oui, super, merci.
Oui, 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 oui.
Merci.
Il y avait juste un truc à trouver. Voilà, alors, est-ce que vous voyez aussi mon écran de Zoom? Parce que pour moi, il cache plus ou moins.
On te voit.
D'accord. Bon, ben, je pense qu'on va y aller comme ça. Alors maintenant, il faut que je retrouve là. On va voir.
Dreams. Never tell anyone your dreams. And then he walked away.
Elle parle du sadhu là.
So I think it was because sometimes if we talk about these things, which are very intimate, that it dilutes them and eventually dissipates them. This is why normally you only speak about these very.
In fact, you said they are like sexual experiences. Is there any similarity between sexual experiences and meditation experiences to compare the later to the former?
I mean, it's just what I meant was simply that just as with some people love to talk about their sexual experiences and write whole books about it, and that's fine. But most people think this is something very private and very intimate, and it's none of your business. It only concerns me and, you know, whoever. And they don't want to talk about that sort of thing. I mean, it's not something you would talk about. You know, it's something which is between the two of you, and that's enough. And likewise with meditation, it's between you and your teacher.
But the masters, your own master or the masters you met before, then great lamas, they talk about their experiences or they keep it quiet?
Well, my own lama never talked about anything. Some might do. They might tell some story about some experience they had if they think it would be helpful, but certainly they would never boast about it. And the Tibetan lamas on the whole, I think they don't talk about that sort of thing very much. They talk about somebody else, but they won't talk about themselves.
Because sometimes if they talk about their own experiences, maybe it is good for the students or to understand more or to have some light about.
Well, I think it would depend on the master. And I think you know, that if they felt it was helpful, then they would speak about it. But if they didn't think it was really helpful, then they wouldn't. But most of the lamas I've ever known never talk about their experiences. They really don't.
You say also about meditation, Jutsumna, transformation only begins to take place when meditation descends from the head to the heart and is actually experienced. The realizations are very bad. They are not accompanied by lights or music. That's 167. My question, when and how does meditation descend from the head to the heart?
Well, it descends, can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Yes, okay. It descends when the meditator and the meditation become one, and there is no separation. When we completely merge with the practice, then somehow it ceases to be an intellectual, up in the brain type of thing, and descends down to the heart chakra. I mean, there's a real feeling that the heart chakra itself becomes the meditation. So this is, you know, this is just what happens. Otherwise, we're thinking about it still, you know. I mean, it's important to get to a level of consciousness which is not connected so much with the brain patterning, you know, because the brain is a very wonderful machine, but it's not the consciousness itself. And what we're trying to do is experience that level of deeper awareness within us.
From the heart chakra, from the head to the heart chakra, you mean?
Yes.
So it is in the head. If it is on the head, it is on the chakra which is more high, no? Highest chakra.
No. From at least in Buddhism, the main chakra which we're trying to open is the heart chakra, because that's also connected with love, compassion, and all these things. And it's very important to recognize also that, as I said in that quote, realization, direct realization of the nature of the mind is very bare. You know, there are two things. One is experiences and one is realization. Experiences are light and bliss and visions and all sorts of exciting things happening. Maybe sometimes very bad things happen, but often, you know, people they imagine that what they are trying to get is all this bliss and clarity and visions and so forth. But that is considered to be merely experiences. They come and they go. They're very nice, you know, like watching a very interesting movie, but, you know, it all ends. What we're trying to do is to go to something deeper than that, which is direct realization of the nature of the mind. And that is not usually accompanied by fireworks. That is a very, very, very naked awareness with no clothes on.
Sometimes in the same context, you said, Jetsumna, we have nothing to realize. It is there. What do you mean by it?
What I mean is that we think that realization is something different from how we really are. But what we're really trying to do is just recognize what has always been there, but we haven't seen it. I mean, the fact that you can hear me and see me, the fact that we have consciousness shows we are conscious, shows we're aware. But normally, because we're talking to ourselves so much and so caught up in all our thoughts and feelings, we don't recognize that naked awareness, that naked consciousness behind it all. Just like if we look at the clouds and the rainbows and the thunderstorms, but we don't see the sky, we don't see the space. And yet none of these clouds and rainbows could appear if there was not the sky.
Our main idea about realization is that something should change in us. Nothing will change.
Well, yes, it changes because we realize we are not who we think we are. That our identification with our conceptual thinking mind is a fiction. And when we see the true nature of the mind, then that is a very, very important breakthrough. Usually it's only a glimpse at the beginning. And after that, my Lama said that once you recognize the nature of the mind, you can start to meditate. Meaning that now we understand what we are trying to do, which is to stabilize and make more constant this naked primordial awareness, which is our true nature. And which is not something that you can grasp, like space. You know, everything appears because there is space for it to appear, but you can't grasp space. You can't say space is mine. This is my space. I'm breathing. You can't breathe my air, right? We are intimately breathing each other's air if we're together, and yet we are not even conscious of that. You know, and yet that is the fundamental of everything, the basis for everything to appear.
Jetsunna, always on the subject of meditation, you say, it is only when you begin.
Voilà, donc, on va peut-être faire 5 minutes de pause. Et puis, on reprend dans 5 minutes. Voilà.